Chapter 149. When I went to school on Monday, Siobhan asked me why I had a bruise on the side of my face. I said that Father was angry and he had grabbed me, so I'd hit him, and we had had a fight. Siobhan asked whether Father had hit me, and I said I didn't know because I got very cross and it made my memory go strange. And then she asked if Father had hit me because he was angry. And I said, he didn't hit me, he grabbed me, but he was angry. Siobhan asked if he grabbed me hard, and I said that he had grabbed me hard. Siobhan asked if I was frightened about going home, and I said I wasn't. Then she asked me if I wanted to talk about it anymore, and I said I didn't. And then she said, okay. And we didn't talk about it anymore, because grabbing is okay if it's on your arm or your shoulder when you are angry, but you can't grab someone's hair or their face. But hitting is not allowed, except if you're already in a fight with someone, and then it is not so bad. When I got home from school, Father was still at work, so I went into the kitchen and took the key out of a little china jug shaped like a nun and opened the back door and went outside and looked inside the dustbin to find my book. I wanted to get my book back because I liked writing it. I liked having a project to do, and I liked it especially if it was a difficult project like a book. And I still didn't know who had killed Wellington, and my book was where I had kept all the clues that I had discovered, and I did not want them to be thrown away. But my book wasn't in the dustbin. I put the lid back on the dustbin and walked down the garden to have a look in the bin where Father keeps the garden waste, such as lawn clippings and apples that have fallen off the trees. But my book wasn't in there either. I wondered if Father had put it into his van and driven up to the tip and put it into one of the big bins up there. But I did not want that to be true because then I would never see it again. One other possibility is that Father had hidden my book somewhere in the house. So I decided to do some detecting and see if I could find it. Except I had to keep listening really hard all the time, so I would hear his van when he pulled up outside the house, so he wouldn't catch me being a detective. I started by looking in the kitchen. My book was approximately 25 centimeters by 35 centimeters by 1 centimeter, so it couldn't be hidden in a very small place, which meant that I didn't have to look in any really small places. I looked on top of the cupboards and down the back of drawers and under the oven, and I used my special backlight torch and a piece of mirror from the utility room to help me see into the dark spaces at the back of the cupboards where the mice used to get in from the garden and have their babies. Then I detected in the utility room. Then I detected in the dining room. Then I detected in the living room where I found the missing wheel from my Airfix Messerschmitt BF 109 G6 model under the sofa. Then I thought I heard Father coming through the front door, and I jumped and I tried to stand up fast. And I banged my knee on the corner of the coffee table, and it hurt a lot. It was only one of the drug people next door dropping something on the floor. Then I went upstairs, but I didn't do any detecting in my own room because I reasoned that Father wouldn't hide something from me in my own room unless he was being very clever and doing what is called a double bluff, like in a real murder mystery novel. So I decided to look in my own room only if I couldn't find the book somewhere else. I detected in the bathroom, but the only place to look was in the airing cupboard. There's nothing in there, which meant that the only room left to detect in was Father's bedroom. I didn't know whether I should look in there because he had told me before not to mess with anything in his room. But if he is going to hide something from me, the best place to hide it would be in his room. So I told myself I would not mess with things in his room. I would move them, and then I would move them back. He would never know I had done it, so he wouldn't be angry. I started by looking under the bed. There were 7 shoes and a comb with lots of hair in it, and a piece of copper pipe, and a chocolate biscuit, and a porn magazine called Fiesta, and a dead bee, and a Homer Simpson powder tie, and a wooden spoon. But not my book. Then I looked in the drawers on either side of the dressing table, but they only contained aspirin and nail clippers and batteries and dental floss and a tampon and tissues and a spare false tooth in case Father lost the false tooth he had to fill the gap where he had knocked a tooth out when he fell off the ladder putting a bird box up in the garden. But my book wasn't in there either. I'd looked in his clothes cupboard. This was full of his clothes on hangers. There was also a little shelf at the top which I could see onto if I stood on the bed, but I had to take my shoes off in case I left a dirty footprint. That would be a clue if Father decided to do some detecting. but the only things on the shelf were more porn magazines and a broken sandwich toaster and 12 wire coat hangers and an old hair dryer that used to belong to Mother. In the bottom of the cupboard was a large plastic toolbox, which was full of tools for doing do-it-yourself, like a drill and a paintbrush and some screws and a hammer. But I could see these without opening the box because it was made of transparent gray plastic. Then I saw there was another box underneath the toolbox, so I lifted the toolbox out of the cupboard. The other box was an old cardboard box that is called a shirt box because people used to buy shirts in them. And when I opened the shirt box, I saw my book was inside it. Then I didn't know what to do. I was happy because Father hadn't thrown my book away. But if I took the book, he would know I had been messing with things in his room and he would be very angry. And I had promised not to mess with things in his room. Then I heard his van pulling up outside the house, and I knew I had to think fast and be clever. So I decided I would leave the book where it was because I reasoned that Father wasn't going to throw it away if he had put it into the shirt box, and I could carry on writing in another book that I would keep really secret, and then maybe later he might change his mind and let me have the first book back again, and I could copy the new book into it. And if he never gave it back to me, I would be able to remember most of what I had written. So I would put it all into the second secret book. And if there were bits I wanted to check to make sure I'd remember them correctly, I could come into his room when he was out and check. Then I heard Father shutting the door of the van. And that was when I saw the envelope. It was an envelope addressed to me. It was lying under my book in the shirt box with some other envelopes. I picked it up. It had never been opened. It said, Christopher Boone, 36 Randolph Street, Swindon, Wiltshire. I noticed there were lots of other envelopes, and they were all addressed to me, and this was interesting and confusing. And then I noticed how the words Christopher and Swindon were written. They were written like this. I only know 3 people who do little circles instead of dots over the letter I. And one of them is Siobhan, and one of them was Mr. Loxley, he used to teach at the school, and one of them was Mother. And then I heard Father opening the front door, so I took one envelope from under the book, and I put the lid back on the shirt box, and I put the toolbox back on the shelf on top of it, and I closed the cupboard door really carefully. And then Father called out, Christopher? I said nothing, because he might be able to hear where I was calling from. I stood and walked around the bed to the door, holding the envelope, trying to make as little noise as possible. Father was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and I thought he might see me, but he was flicking through the post, which had come that morning, and his head was pointing downward. Then he walked away from the foot of the stairs towards the kitchen, and I closed the door of his room very quietly and went into my own room. I wanted to look at the envelope, but I didn't want to make Father angry, so I hid the envelope underneath my mattress. Then I walked downstairs and said hello to Father. And he said, So, what have you been up to today, young man? And I said, Today, we did life skills with Mrs. Gray, which was using money and public transport. And I had some tomato soup for lunch and 3 apples. And I practiced some maths in the afternoon and went for a walk in the park with Mrs. Peters and collected leaves for making collages. And Father said, Excellent, excellent. What do you fancy for chow tonight? Chow is food. I said, I wanted baked beans and broccoli. And Father said, I think that can be very easily arranged. Then I sat on the sofa and I read some more of the book I was reading called Chaos by James Gleick. Then I went to the kitchen and I had my baked beans and broccoli while Father had sausages and eggs and fried bread and a mug of tea. And then Father said, I'm going to put those shelves up in the living room if that's all right with you. I'll make a bit of a racket, I'm afraid, so if you want to watch television, you're going to have to shift it upstairs. And I said, I'll go and be on my own in my room. And he said, Good man. And I said, Thank you for supper, because that is being polite. And he said, No problem, kiddo. Then I went up into my room and shut the door. And I took out the envelope from underneath my mattress. I held the envelope up to the light to see if I could detect what was inside the envelope. The paper of the envelope was too thick. Wondered whether I should open the envelope because it was something I'd taken from Father's room. But then I reasoned that it was addressed to me, so it belonged to me. So it was okay to open it. So I opened the envelope. Inside there was a letter, and this was what was written in the letter. 451C, Chapter Road, Willesden, London, NW2 5NG 0208 887 8907. Dear Christopher, I'm sorry it's been such a very long time since I wrote my last letter to you. I've been very busy. I've got a new job working as a secretary for a factory that makes things out of steel. You'd like it a lot. The factory is full of huge machines that make the steel and cut it and bend it into whatever shapes they need. This week they're making a roof for a cafe in a shopping center in Birmingham. It's shaped like a huge flower, and they're going to stretch canvas over it and make it look like an enormous tent. Also, we've moved into the new flat as last you can see from the address. It's not as nice as the old one, and I don't like Willesden very much, but it's easier for Roger to get to work, and he's bought it. He only rented the other one, so we can get our own furniture and paint the walls the color we want to. And that's why it's such a long time since I wrote my last letter to you. Because it's been hard work packing up all of our things and then unpacking them and then getting used to this new job. I'm very tired now and I must go to sleep, and I want to put this in the letterbox tomorrow morning, so I'll sign off now and write you another letter soon. You haven't written to me yet, so I know you're probably still angry with me. I'm sorry, Christopher, but I still love you. I hope you don't stay angry with me forever, and I'd love it if you were able to write me a letter. But remember to send it to the new address. I think of you all the time. Lots of love. Your mom, XXXXXX. Then I was really confused because Mother had never worked as a secretary for a firm that made things out of steel. Mother had worked as a secretary for a big garage in the center of town. And Mother had never lived in London. Mother had always lived with us. And Mother had never written a letter to me before. There was no date on the letter, so I couldn't work out when Mother had written the letter. And I wondered whether someone else had written the letter and pretended to be Mother. Then I looked at the front of the envelope and I saw there was a postmark, and there was a date on the postmark. It is quite difficult to read, but it said, which meant that the letter was posted on 16 October 1997, which is 18 months after Mother had died. And then the door of my bedroom opened and Father said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm reading a letter." And he said, "I finished the drilling. That David Attenborough nature program's on the telly if you're interested." And I said, "Okay." Then he went downstairs again. I looked at the letter and thought really hard. It was a mystery and I couldn't work it out. Perhaps the letter was in the wrong envelope and it hadn't been written before Mother had died. But why was she writing from London? The longest she'd ever been away was a week, when she went to visit her cousin Ruth, who had cancer. But Ruth lived in Manchester. Then I thought perhaps it wasn't a letter from Mother. Perhaps it was a letter to another person called Christopher, from that Christopher's mother. I was excited. Now I started writing my book. When I started writing my book, there was only one mystery I had to solve. Now there were two. I decided I would not think about it anymore that night because I didn't have enough information and could easily leap to the wrong conclusions. Like Mr. Athenley Jones of Scotland Yard, which is a dangerous thing to do because you should make sure you have all the available clues before you start deducing things. That way you're much less likely to make a mistake. I decided I would wait until Father was out of the house. Then I would go into the cupboard in his bedroom and look at the other letters and see who they were from and what they said. I folded the letter and hid it under my mattress in case Father found it and got cross. Then I went downstairs and watched the television.